listening to Season 6 of the Devoted Dreamers podcast, where we talk about our God-shaped dreams. I'm your host, Merritt Onsa, and in this new season, I want more than ever to point you to God's truth to help you move from uncertainty to action in your God-shaped dream. We will begin each episode with stories of women just like you who have learned to listen to that still small voice of God, who have found the courage to take their next step and have trusted Him along the way. But you need to know that this show isn't about hustle or doing more, working harder, or being better. Nobody needs more of that. This show is about experiencing God's grace and learning His love for us in the midst of the labors, dreams, and ambitions He's given us, and all the challenges that come hand in hand with those. So whether you're starting out, or maybe even feeling like the years of dreaming are beginning to run out, whatever your dream and the doubts you're battling along the way, you need to know God sees you. And there's a beautiful passage in Ephesians 1 that I keep coming back to, where our gracious Father reminds you that you were created and chosen for a purpose, in order that you might live for the praise of His glory. So whatever might be standing in the way of your dream, whether that's something deep inside of you or something external, God has a plan for you, His daughter, and He is with you in it. And I pray that you will know those truths a little deeper today as a result of this conversation. You can always connect with me and the other listeners in my Facebook group or via my Instagram at MerrittJO, or as a patron of the show. Everything you need to know, including the show notes, can be found on my website at merrittonsa.com. And now, here's today's episode. Hello, Devoted Dreamers, and welcome back to the Devoted Dreamers podcast. This conversation today is going to be really fun. I am excited to introduce to you Rachel Pellegrino. She is the founder and publisher of Little Lamb Books, an award-winning independent publisher of faith-based fiction and nonfiction for elementary, middle grade, and young adult readers, which is super fun. And I can't wait for Rachel to get to tell you about how she got into being a publisher and all the things that God has taught her along the way. So let me just welcome Rachel Pellegrino.
Hey,
hi.
For having me.
And I should have asked you, your name is pronounced like the fuzzy water?
It is exactly like that. Exactly.
Awesome. Well, I was trying to remember, and I should have asked you before we started recording, but we met in kind of a unique way, like on Facebook or something, or in a Facebook group. Do you remember?
I think it was a Facebook group.
Okay.
And I found your name and your podcast, but I think that's how it was, the connection there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's always interesting to see the connections that God allows me to make for the podcast. So thanks for being here and saying yes, even though I was a complete stranger.
Well, thanks for having me. And I know I'm a complete stranger, but I'm excited to get to chat and to share and talk about what God's doing.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I always feel like at the end of an interview, I have a new friend. So
that's the best part.
Yeah. 30 minutes from now. There you go. Anyway, tell us about your God-shaped dream.
Well, Little Lamb Books came out of, I would say, a dark place in my world. At the time, I had a young child. I had just gone through a rough loss of a pregnancy, and I had been teaching for 15 years and had decided after all of that to just stop and be with my daughter and be a stay-at-home mom. And I loved it. But I just felt like I was being called to something else, like in the future. And I kept thinking, it'll be 4 or 5 years from now. But I started taking business classes via computer and remote, locations. And I was having an enjoyable time. I was with my daughter and I was taking classes and I was learning things. And it morphed into a business plan. All of my classes just came to this point where I had this business plan for Little Lamb Books. And I went to my husband and I said, I have an idea. Do you think we could do this? And from there, we will be celebrating our 4th birthday in the next couple months. And I just was excited because I felt like God just kept opening these doors. And the next thing I knew, I was owning a company for books, and books are my passion. Like, that's my hobby passion. So I was really excited about that part. So yeah.
Yeah. And how did you know that it was book publishing? Like, I mean, clearly you said it was your passion and you were a teacher. You've probably been around books your whole life.
Well, yes. And I love to read. If you talk to my mom, she would ask me if I wanted to learn to cook. And I would say, no, I'm reading. Or, there was always, I could do other things, but I always loved to read. And so books were my passion. When I had my daughter, I found that I reverted back to all of the classic books that I had grown up with, which is the beautiful part about books, is that they leave such an impact on our lives. But I was having trouble finding faith-based material for her that wasn't, a couple years old. And so that part of it was, I don't know, it's a little strange for me. And so I just kind of used that as my model. I wanted to see if I could put together books that she would enjoy. And I thought, well, if I can do that for her, then I'm sure there are other parents out there who are looking for clean, faith-based material, entertaining books that have value-driven content, but that are fun to read. And so I kind of set that as my mission. And when I started putting the business plan together, that was the goal, was both that and to leave a legacy for my daughter. And when I got all of the details started, I started sifting through it and praying over it and saying, okay, Lord, this was just an idea. I don't know if this is really what I'm supposed to be doing. And I met with another publisher that lives in our city. And I said, okay, you're not anything like me. You don't have the same content idea. You're selling in a different business model. But what do you think of my idea? Like, do you think it's real? And the fact that someone from a different company, a different genre, a whole different part of the industry said, you know what, you fleshed this out and this makes sense. I think you actually could do something with this. That was the moment I kind of went, oh, okay. And so all the classes that I took, I thought I was just picking them, but each of those classes that I took helped mold what became the beginning of my company. And so that to me was God's kind of opening the door and saying, look at what you could do. Look at what is possible. Look at what you've kind of hidden in your heart and you haven't really shared with anybody, but I know. And so here's the beginning of your next steps. Because I could have gone back to teaching when my daughter started kindergarten. I could have done a whole lot of other things. And so this was just the way, a confirmation for me, as I did seek out other people who are business people and who were smarter than me in a lot of other areas. And I just said, is this realistic? Is this doable? Is this, something that would be successful? And then I started talking to other parents, at my daughter's preschool and at church. And I was asking them, what are you looking for in books? What kinds of stories do you look for? Where do you find your books? And I realized that as parents, especially as believers, there wasn't a lot of content available. And that was just sad to me because growing up, we had a Christian bookstore, I don't know, a couple miles down the street, and we went there all the time. And I was always finding books, always. And now there's a ton of great books in the general market, but there's not as many in our Christian and biblical markets. And I find that to be just strange. And so I thought there's a gap here, and who's going to fill in the gap? And that was me. So
yeah, that's really fun.
So that was a really long answer to your really short question.
No, it's good. That's why we're here. I want to know all about that. And so I don't know if this is an obvious question to anyone listening, but you said earlier, you wanted to see if you could put together books that your daughter would enjoy. Were you then like writing books? Like, did you start as a writer who became a publisher, or how did that play out?
That's a really good question. No, my mom thought I should just write the books, and that was her suggestion. And I always bounce things off my mom. So I come to her and said, what do you think about this? Oh, you can write that book. But I have an entrepreneurial spirit, and I felt like I could be that one person who could write a book, which would be just fine because I have some stuck in a drawer that I could do. But wouldn't it be kind of cool to help other authors realize their dreams while I'm realizing mine? And it became more of an empowering them movement for me, that I could find that needle in a haystack that maybe some of the top 5 publishing houses would ignore, and they would get to see the light of day, and they would make an impact on a generation. And so I do have my own manuscripts tucked away, and I've actually been working on a nonfiction devotional, but they've always taken kind of a backseat to what I'm doing for others. And we found some great stories that have, I feel, maybe been overlooked by other publishers for whatever reason, but we were able to find them because I do feel like God leads us to those people. And so we find them either at conferences or through our Twitter event or through just general queries to our email. And from there, we develop them, the ones that we feel are a really good fit for us. We develop them. And so I'm not only realizing my dream, but I'm also realizing it for others.
I love that. That is really fun and not at all what I expected you to say. So,
Yep.
You mentioned your Twitter event. Will you talk about that? Because I think that's a really fun piece of what you're doing too.
Sure. We host on Twitter a one-day event called #FaithPitch. It's FAITH pitch, PITCH. And it's a one-day event where writers who are unpublished, unrepresented, unknown, have a finished manuscript, and it has to be finished. So it means it's completed, edited. You've kind of worked out as many of the kinks as you know how to work out. And you pitch it with 280 characters on Twitter. And what happens is we send out invitations to over 100, well, it's about 80 to 100 agents and editors, and we kind of rotate those. But we send out the invitations to them. We let them know what the date is, and we say, hey, there's going to be all these authors on this date during this time period. You should come check them out. And what happens is during their day, whatever their timetable looks like, whatever their schedule allows, then they come and they can review and watch the Twitter feed, and see what's available. In the first 2 years, we did just fiction. And this past year, we introduced nonfiction. So now we have fiction and nonfiction. It is faith-based, biblical values, what most people would call Christian content, or for the CBA market or the Christian Book Association market. And we take everything from kids' board books all the way up to adult historical romance and sci-fi and all those genres in between, and all those age categories: middle grade, young adult, new adult, etc. And if you have a finished manuscript and you have done the editing process and really fleshed it out, then you come in and you pitch it with a certain hashtag. So you include #FaithPitch plus whatever your genre or age group is. And then what happens is you can just schedule those, or you can sit there and watch the feed if you want and learn from it. But then the editors and agents from literary agencies and other publishing houses come in and they look at it. And if they like it, they heart it. And what's awesome about that is that's an invitation for you to query them. Because then once they heart it, they'll give you directions and say, okay, I want to see the first 5 chapters. Here's my email address. That's an open invitation that you don't always get in this industry. And so from 8 a.m. Central Time to 8 p.m. Central Time, you have that time frame to do that. And I always encourage people to schedule your pitches, because then if you have to go to work or you're interrupted, you don't have to worry about it. But at the end of the day, we generally have about a half dozen to a dozen who have earned their way into a contract. We actually have more that get hearts, but they don't always pan out either because it's not a good fit, or maybe their manuscript's not as ready as it needs to be, whatever the reason. But usually within about a week, I'll start hearing from about a dozen people who have signed with someone. And that's just an awesome, that's just like, yay, we've made this collaboration. We made this connection for someone. And so we get to rejoice with them. And it's such an awesome, happy, opportunity to have that happen for them. So
I love it. I mean, we were talking before I hit record about this and just how it's not really about you. Like, it's really fun that your dream is also, as you said earlier, supporting the dreams of others. So
yes,
that's really cool. And now I'm like, ooh, I wonder what I could do related to that idea.
Right.
How could I help dreamers more than I am? Anyway, thanks for sharing. That's really, really fun. And so your next one of those is November 20th, right? Which is coming up here in a couple of weeks.
Yes, it's November 20th from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And I host it usually with my interns, or a few of our authors will jump on and help kind of monitor things. And that's always a really good time, because we try to make it fun and encourage people, but also, we're also telling them, hey, you need to add this hashtag, or hey, this is what you need to do. And so that's always fun too.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's awesome. Okay. So I'm going to put all that in the show notes and link to your website as well, so that anybody out there with a finished manuscript could jump on. And that sounds really fun. And the fact that people could get signed by the end of the day. What? Really?
Yeah, I know. And usually, I don't want to say it's not usually by the end of the day, but usually within, the industry moves a little bit slow, but usually by the end of the day, they know that they can query someone that maybe they either hadn't met before or didn't know before, or, something like that. And so that's really kind of an exciting thing.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes my heart beat a little faster just hearing you talk about that. It's so cool.
It's awesome.
Yeah. Well, will you talk a little bit about some of the struggles or challenges that you faced along the way? And I know you're almost 4 years into this, but if you can kind of put yourself back in that place of being early in the dream, what was kind of standing in your way at the beginning?
Oh, goodness. I think for me, when you think about a publishing company, there's a lot of detail, a lot of information, a lot of all of that stuff. And it was daunting at the time. I came out of teaching, which I loved. I loved my content. I loved everything about what I did. But when I had my daughter, and I had her a little later in my life, I wanted time with her. I wanted time to be with her and to know her and, to raise her. And my job at my school was very detail oriented, very deadline driven. And I was worried about how that would impact her. So when I chose to stay home after the loss of my second pregnancy, I was kind of in this haze of, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know why I've had to go through what I went through, but I know that I have a plan and a purpose, but I was kind of bewildered. It was a very emotional, very physically taxing situation. And I kind of lost myself in just being sad, trying to be happy for my daughter, trying to kind of walk through the grief part of it. And I think at the time I had to overcome those insecurities of I wasn't worthy and I wasn't good enough and I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't inundated in the industry. I didn't know all the ins and outs. So when I first wrote my business plan, I really kind of tucked it away. I thought, this isn't going to happen. There's no way God would pick me for this. This is too big. This is way too big for me. And I remember I went down for prayer at my church and I was really struggling. And the lady who prayed for me didn't know me. I was a stranger to her, but the prayer at that time that she prayed for me, it was comforting, and it touched on small pieces of what I was feeling in almost like a check mark way. God heard me. God knew already what was happening. And why couldn't I do this? Why wouldn't he call me to something different, something new, something, that was in my wheelhouse? I was fully capable, but I just didn't trust myself. And so I think I just had to get out of my own way. I'm a pretty big go-getter. I mean, if I have an idea, I'm pretty impulsive. I want to go do it. Like, let's just go do it. So I dragged my feet for a little while, but once I felt like I was given the green light, I just literally threw myself into it. And when my daughter would nap, or, in the evening when she was in bed, I would just sit there and read everything I could get my hands on. And my husband is very business savvy in terms of, like, he works in the finance industry. And I would ask him questions like, how does this work? And how do we set this up? And, if it was you, what would you do? And then I started going to conferences. And so for me, it was just pulling the trigger, but I had come from just this dark spot, and I needed something that I could hold on to. And I really feel like God gave me this dream in a time where I wasn't allowing myself to dream. And it was just, here, start this and do this and build a legacy and impact other families for me, impact a reading generation for me. Because I never felt called to the mission field. I never felt like that was my goal. I never felt like I was going to be doing those things, but I was in my own way reaching a generation. As a teacher, you reach a generation. Whether you're allowed to talk about Christ on your campus or not, you're reaching a generation. You're touching their lives. So I had to kind of step outside of myself and say, okay, what is the purpose of this, and how can I do this, and how does God want me to do this? And so I think it took really kind of stepping back and saying, it's okay, you can do this. He wouldn't have given this to you if you couldn't do this. So,
right. And then as you take those steps, you start to realize, like, oh, here it is. This is it. I can.
Yes. That was a few of the first couple things that happened for us with our books and stuff. I was just like, oh my goodness, wow. Yeah. It left me speechless more than once. So,
So what do you feel like you learned from that season of, going through that, not believing in yourself, is what you said, to actually launching?
Oh my goodness. What did I learn? Not only does God have big plans for us that we can't even imagine or see, but that we do have to keep moving forward. That sometimes you get inundated with a lot of information, no matter what you're doing. Whether you're a mom, a stay-at-home mom, you get inundated with a lot of information. Whether you're a working mom, whether you're a parent that, has their own business, whether you work for someone, there's all this information. We're on the information overload in our society. And so it's very hard to know what to think about what your next best step is. And so it's a faith journey. And I don't know how to take my faith out of my journey. So I always know that it's a faith journey and I have to keep moving forward. Even in my grief, I had to keep moving forward. My daughter gave me purpose, but ultimately God was calling me to walk through that so that I can help others, so that I can minister to others, so that I can understand others and empathize with others. And so just because we're passionate and excited about a dream and a purpose, that's a wonderful thing. But we're always going to have peaks and valleys. And so you have to love it enough and keep moving forward enough that you don't just freeze and not do anything. I mean, if you have if I've learned anything, is that I, in and of myself, can be like a tortoise, and I will suck my head in and I will freeze and I will not go anywhere and do anything else. Because when I look at my surroundings and I look at my difficulties and I look at all it's very easy for me to just kind of withdraw. And that's what I was doing. And so what happened is I had to learn that it doesn't even have to be a big step. It's just a little step. It's waking up in the morning. It's waking up and having breakfast with your family. It's waking up, having breakfast, and go to the library and get a couple books to read. Or it's getting up and baking something new. Or, it's whatever it is that keeps you moving. But you take that next step. And for me in my business, it was go to a conference and meet people, which is outside my comfort zone completely as an introvert. So, it was reach out to people via email and say, hi, my name is, and this is what I'm starting, and I just would like your advice. What would you suggest? And it's taking that next step that gets you to the next phase or the next part or whatever it is. And amazingly enough, when we do that, we're actually being obedient to what God has for us, and He opens doors. And it's just amazing, the doors that He will open for you. But you have to have faith that faith walk to make that happen.
Yeah, I totally believe that as well. That we just have to keep taking a step, even if it's the wrong one.
Yes, well, and you will do that. And I have done those. Though there are a lot of wrong steps that you can do in my line of business, and costly ones even. And so, yes, you're going to learn from your mistakes. And some of that is hard. It really can be hard because it involves people. And so there are many times where your mistakes, those steps that you take that you think you're making you've gathered all your information, you're making all these decisions. But then other people are involved. And if they're not doing their part or they're not walking their faith or whatever that is, sometimes your mistake ends up that's what it is. And the hard part is when there are other people involved. Because we've walked through that. We've walked through where we feel we have had not betrayal, that's not the right word, but just miscommunication or a lack of trust. And when those happen, it can be painful. And you can withdraw. You will like, oh, okay, I'm never going to do that again. And that doesn't work. You can't do that. You have to, grieve whatever and work through it and be smarter and wiser and all those things. But mistakes happen, and you have to keep walking. You can't just stop because of that.
Yeah, exactly. Well, are there some verses of scripture that have just kind of been a foundation for you or supported you in this process?
I have lots of scriptures. Yeah. I have lots of them. For me, my life scripture has always been Hebrews 11:1. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things unseen. I don't remember when exactly in my school career that became a verse that I clung to, but I know it was early on. And I know that it was something I came upon. It wasn't that was handed to me. It was during a study time, I don't know, in a Bible class or a church youth group or something like that. But it was early on. And I remember that I struggled at the time with understanding faith. Like, what is faith? I just believed. I went to church with my family and I believed, but it took me to a place where I had to understand faith. So for me, Hebrews 11:1 is huge. Obviously, the really big one, Jeremiah 29:11, God has a purpose and a plan for us, especially during the time that I was grieving. That was big. That was a big one. And then we use John 10:27 for our business verse, because it's my sheep listen to my voice. I know them and they follow me. And because of our company name and because of the history of our company and what we stand for, that's very powerful for us, because we are wanting to reach a generation and help them to hear his voice. And so that was key.
Awesome. That's great. Do you have some advice that you would share with a woman who's listening and maybe just starting out in her God-shaped dream?
Surround yourself with supporters. And I don't mean just yes people. I think that you have to have those people who will speak into you and into your dream with honesty and integrity and with prayer, so that they have your best interest at heart, that they will help warn you off of things, but also encourage you into things. And, pursuing any dream can be isolating, and you can feel very vulnerable and afraid. You can be very fearful about the results or what's going to happen if. And so having a network and a support group, whether that's your family, your church, even a group within your industry that you can call and like spill your beans and vent to and trust them with that information, but also pray with you, is huge. And that was very big for me because I did feel isolated. I'm in Texas, and we're not the publishing mecca of the world. So it was really important for me to find a group of people that I could plug into. The other thing I would tell someone is just be who God calls you to be in that moment. Because what I am now and how I look at my business now versus where I was 4 years ago is very different. And so our lives shift daily, weekly, monthly. I mean, everything shifts. And so when we can acknowledge the fact that in this moment, this is what I'm doing to the best of my ability, I'm doing it. And then we can lean into who the Holy Spirit is calling us to be and allowing him to guide us and to give us wisdom and discernment and truth. Then that is so important. And sometimes we get confused. We don't know for sure, who are we supposed to be right now? Well, you can only be who God has called you to be. It's very easy to put on other masks and other faces, but you need to be your own authentic you, because that's who God made you to be. And so I think those two things are helpful, at least for me. Those are helpful.
Well, and it's so easy to get caught up in what we see others doing and thinking, oh, I should try that too.
Yes.
And that takes us away from maybe who God created us to be if we're like constantly distracted by what's outside of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Well, you have a great list of resources to share. Can you pick a few of those that are your favorite?
Sure. The Armor of God by Priscilla Shirer is a really good Bible study devotional type workbook. And I honestly, I have taken it really slow through that, but it was so helpful for me. I love that scripture about the armor of God. And so she brings it into a very real, everyday way of using it. And I enjoy everything about Priscilla Shirer, everything that she does, I love. I think Jesus Calling, which I'm sure everybody's heard of, but for me on a daily devotional time, for some reason, it doesn't matter when I pick it up, whatever page I'm on for that day is like, that's exactly what I needed. And so it's just a great daily type devotional for me. And then I listen to podcasts a lot because I'm constantly in motion. So whether I'm in my car or when I'm walking or any of those things, Annie F. Downs is both funny and, poignant. And so her podcast, That Sounds Fun, is good. I learned about Enneagrams from her. I was not an Enneagram person, or I don't know if I'm saying that right, Enneagram. And so I learned from her on that one. And then there is another group for writers. It's called Serious Writer. And they do webinars for writers on everything from like social media to just writing certain genres, the business aspects. And so I want to give them a shout out because their platform is really user friendly and easy to do. But even me in what I do every day, I find things that I go, oh, that'd be fun to listen to. And so I can take notes or I can just listen to it while I'm working. So those are just some. I have a long list, but it varies from everything from, devotionals all the way up to industry things. So I don't know. Those are just
awesome. Cool. No, that's really, really helpful. And actually, I did want to mention, I had gone over to the Facebook group for podcast listeners and asked, what do y'all want to hear from a publisher? And like I told you earlier, there were so many questions and like really deep nitty gritty questions. And so it's possible that we may do a little bit of like an office hours or something in my Facebook group with you, because I think you would just really be able to encourage and share a lot of helpful insight. So,
well, good. I can definitely do that. And I mean, if you want to ask me one of those, you can. And otherwise, we'll set a date. We'll have an office date.
Yeah, no, that would be really fun. I guess kind of this is like a big picture question. So I'll just throw this out there, but how hard is it to get a book published?
Hard. Yeah.
Pretty hard.
It's hard. I just tell people use all the tools in your toolbox. Like our Twitter event, #FacePitch is a tool in your toolbox. It's not the end all be all. It doesn't work for everybody, but it's a tool. But you have to learn to query well. You have to go to conferences and network, because you can do in-person pitches. There's so many avenues, but you have to be willing to put in the work. It's not just sign and be done either, because once you do find someone who will sign you, whether it's an agent or an editor, you have to still put in the work, because our industry is changing every day, and how you find material is different every day. So it is hard. It's a very big challenge. But I will say this, those people who do the work, who are willing to step out of their comfort zone, because just by industry, most authors, not all, but most are a bit introverted. So it takes getting out of your comfort zone. But it's also, being willing to pray over it, to seek out those opportunities, to take those steps. And it can happen. I mean, we've signed 14 authors to our roster. That's 14 people who 24 months ago didn't think they were going to get anything. They were searching and trying to find something. So it is doable, but it is hard.
Yeah, I think we knew you were going to say that.
Like anything, there are challenges.
Exactly. Yeah. And God's going to be with you in it. So don't let that make you shy away from it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, we didn't really get a chance to talk about a lot of the types of books or the books themselves. And I, would love to be able to have you share how people could connect with you guys and get, we're getting close to the Christmas shopping season when this episode's going to come out. And so what do you want the listeners to know about your books, about maybe a discount they could get from you guys? Tell us all the things.
Well, we have a website. It's www.littlelambooks.com, and we have a shop there, and you can find all of our titles there. We have picture books, we have early reader chapter books, we have young adult novels. So if you have a reader on your Christmas list and they need something new and fresh and entertaining with clean values, then that's where you go. We are on Amazon. We're actually about, I would say, 5 out of our 7 books are on Target online and on Walmart online. You can find them. And we're also on Barnes & Noble. So you can type in our titles or our authors' names. If you want to list, obviously, on our website, you can see all of our authors. And we've got 5 new books coming out this year. So on top of the 4 that are already out, we have 5 new books. One of our books that came out last year is a Christmas book. It's actually an ABC Christmas book. C is for Christmas, and it's by Michelle Medlock Adams. It's a great Christmas book, beautiful illustrations. And so you can find us really where books are sold. And if they don't have us on their shelves, you can ask them to order, because bookstores are able to do that. Whether it's an indie bookstore or one of the big box stores, they can order it for you. But if you want us directly, that's the best place. And we are on Facebook. We're on all the social media platforms: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, Pinterest, you name it. We're there. You can find us. And you just type in our name, Little Lamb Books, and it's plural books. And so we have a great library of books. We have been endorsed by Focus on the Family. We have all of our books have won national awards. All 4 of our current books have won national awards. So really, once you find the author's name and the title, you can find us anywhere. So
sweet. And you said to me earlier, you don't know the the discount amount, but you do have a discount code if people want to shop via your website.
Yes, we are still in kind of putting all that together with, the holidays being just soon. But we decided to give you guys a code, Dreamers19. And so when you plug that into our online store, you can use that to get a discount. Now, I think in your notes, you'll probably put what that discount is. So they have to check your notes and your newsletter. But if you'll plug in Dreamers with an S, 19, all run together, then you'll be able to get a discount on our website in our store, and then we'll ship that to you. So.
Awesome. Yay. Thank you so much for that. I have a 1-year-old and she'll be almost 5 by Christmas time. And so I'm always looking for, I had the same thoughts you had, like, where are all the books with the, like lessons that I can talk to her about God and Jesus and faith and,
we have a book, a little cute book, our debut book, The Bubble Who Would Not Pop. It's about prayer, and it has a cute prayer journal in the back for little kids, and it's beautiful. And then for your 5-year-old, we have an early reader because she's learning all the words, and it's great. Teeny Sweeney is a great character and great inspiration for kids. And I just believe that kids need to read, but I also believe that by reading, we need to give them material that will inspire their faith. And as they grow into who God wants them to be, that these books can encourage those characteristics. So that's our goal. That's our mission, is to have that kind of material for people with kids, because our children deserve that. They deserve material that's going to inspire them and be a positive influence of their lives. So
yeah, and they soak up stuff so easily. There are a few books that my husband has kind of put aside, like, we are not reading these anymore.
So, well, that was our beta. Our beta readers. That was the thing, is I if I'm going to read it 10 times, I have to like it too.
Yes, 10 times in one night.
Yes, yes, exactly. So we try to give you guys everything for that.
Thank you. Thank you so much for saying yes to the dream that God gave you. And it's just been really fun to hear your story and get to know you a little bit more. And here we are. We're friends. Like I said, 30 minutes later.
All the things.
Well, probably not all the things. So we'll have to talk again. But I would love to have you close us out, Rachel, with just sharing, as you look back on this season of, where you were before this was even a thing and where you are now, how do you feel like God has changed you in this process?
I have always been, I guess you would say, self-aware and knowledgeable about my strengths and my weaknesses. I felt like I just knew who God had called me to be. But when I started this journey, I realized that I had fears and I had doubts and I had some insecurities that I wasn't maybe as aware of as I thought. And I had my eyes on who I thought I was and not necessarily who I felt like God had really made me to be. So when I stepped out and I decided to take the step for this journey, I thought my faith was strong, but I found that there were cracks in the surface, and I had to really lean into my Heavenly Father, and I had to lean in to who my identity was in Him. And I don't think I ever really felt like I struggled with that before, but the reality is that nothing was fixed because I started this company. Nothing was just wrapped up with a bright red bow. But over the last 4 years, I've been able to pull back layers of me in the role of a leader, in the role of a mother, and in the role of an entrepreneur, and also as a child of God, and to look in my mirror and remind myself of who I am and whose I am. I'm still learning. I mean, there's so much that I'm still learning in my journey, but He has called me to take care of what He wants me to take care of. And that's my family, and that's my relationship with Him, and that's my authors. And by doing all of that, I'm learning how to step out without as much fear. There's still always going to be those moments, but I'm learning to face my fear. I'm learning to walk in the strengths that he's given me. And it's okay to do that and still want to lean on him. Just because we're strong doesn't mean we don't need him. And so my relationship with my faith and my relationship with my Heavenly Father has grown so much stronger and become so much better. And for that, I'm really, really grateful.
If starting on your dream has ever felt too daunting, this was the episode for you. On the day I'm recording this, I also just finished listening to Rachel on the Christian Woman Leadership Podcast. If you want to hear more from her, you might go give that one a listen as well. It's episode 69 over there. But before you do that, here are my big takeaways from this interview. Takeaway number 1, I wanted to point out, in case you didn't notice, that her dream came out of something she loved and felt passionate about, books and reading. But the dream wasn't solely about her and that passion. In fact, she wanted to help others realize their dreams in the process, as well as filling in the gap that she had noticed in terms of uplifting, values-based books for this next generation, like her own daughter. So it did impact her, but it also impacted others. Okay, takeaway number 2, that even though her dream came out of a passion, it wasn't clear as day for her to pursue this. She began from a place of grief and darkness, and at first she tucked her idea away and sat on it. But then she fought back the voices of uncertainty and fear. She sought the Lord in prayer and found the courage to just take the next step, to start talking to people about her idea. Okay, finally, takeaway number 3, she reminded us that this is a faith journey, that there will be peaks and valleys even when you know what your dream is. And that's for those of you still trying to figure it out. But she drew near to Jesus and she talked to the next few people. She sent the next email, and it all happened through the little acts of faithfulness and trusting him, not in one fell swoop. Okay, and if those last 2 takeaways sounded a little bit too much alike, here's a summary. Be who God calls you to be in that moment. And I'm saying that for you as much as for me, because in this season of being a mom of young kids, and I want to do so much more for them and for the podcast, but I just can't. I don't have the capacity right now. I have to know my season, and I have to put on the brakes, and I have to rest at night, and I need to invest in my family. I want to invest in my family, and there will be another season for doing more. And I bet it's going to come sooner than I can imagine. I also love hearing reviews from all of you about the show, and they just keep popping in. A recent one I've gotten is from Ellie Jane 80, who says the podcast is always so practical and encouraging. Her words were, raising children and pursuing a God-shaped dream is always hard. Sister, I hear ya. Merritt does an amazing job of balancing real-life hard things with the encouragement we all need from God's Word. Every single episode is full of great wisdom and helpful takeaways, no matter where you are on your journey. And I pray that's true. No matter where you are on your journey, I pray that you hear the truth of God's Word, the truth of the gospel, the rest that we can have in the midst of dreaming and momming and working and whatever it is that you have going on in addition to your dream. I pray that you get takeaways of great wisdom and helpful tools. And if you're a faithful listener of the podcast, first, I want to thank you so much for coming back week after week. It means so much to me, and I'm honored to have the opportunity to share these conversations with you and pour that little bit of truth into your life on a regular basis. And I pray that it encourages you towards your dream. I want to let you know that Devoted Dreamers is 1 month away from wrapping up for 2019. I can hardly believe it, but my last interview episode will go live on December 4th. And then I'm going to take the rest of the month off. But if you know me, you might know that that means I'm actually just taking time off from producing new content and instead planning for next year. 2020, that number, that year still blows my mind. I remember being a kid and thinking I was going to be really old by the time 2020 rolled around. But as I plan and pray for what's next with the Devoted Dreamers podcast, I would love to ask you to pray with me over how you might support the show next year. If you've been encouraged by these stories, if you've been pointed to Jesus, or even been more willing to take a step toward your dream despite your fear, would you consider joining my team of patrons between now and the end of the year with a small monthly contribution? They start at $2 a month. You could even maybe go up to $5. There's some larger ones if you want to like really dig in there. But I want to do so much more with the show, and the support and resources needed for that will hopefully in the end serve you. It takes time and money to do more, and your gift would mean so much in helping me take some steps towards some of the other dreams I have for the podcast. Anyway, you can learn more at patreon.com/Devoted Dreamers Podcast. That's Patreon, or just click the support this podcast button in your podcast listening app. And have you been wanting to connect with other dreamers, like wondering how you could meet people like you? Well, we would love to meet you over in the Facebook group. It's a great place to find community with other like-minded women who love Jesus and believe he's given them a dream to pursue, even if they don't know exactly what that dream is. We share our challenges and successes. Come on, join us in the Devoted Dreamers Insiders group. You will find the show notes for this episode at meritonsa.com/podcast/134. There you can connect with Rachel, find that discount code she mentioned that you can use at Little Lamb Books Shop. We don't know what it is at this moment, the amount, but check the show notes. It'll be in there. And maybe you could pick something up for a special Christmas present for a sweet young one in your life. And don't forget, she mentioned November 20th is the date of the next #faith pitch. So if you have a book proposal, or you're working on one, or you just want to see what other people are doing with theirs, you might want to go check out Faith Pitch on Twitter. That's November 20th, and I'm pretty sure it goes all day. Okay, friends, that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining me in this conversation. And wherever you are with your God-shaped dreams, may you have the courage to take one step toward their realization today.
Whoa.